Breaking news, Jaguars fans. The Jacksonville Jaguars have traded for an offensive lineman, Daniel Faalele of the New York Football Giants, in exchange for a late-round pick. We're going to break down what this means for the Jacksonville Jaguars and why I think it could actually be telling of another situation that we've talked about recently here on the channel. But make sure you guys subscribe, because when breaking news happens, we got you covered here on the Jaguars channel. And look, Jags Now's got you covered. The Jaguars are currently doing a joint practice with the Carolina Panthers. We're going to have a video breaking that down as well. So make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications for all things Jacksonville Jaguars. This episode of Jags Now is presented by our wonderful friends over at Prize Picks. So the news came in early this morning that the Jaguars are trading for Daniel Faalele, formerly a right guard of the Baltimore Ravens, in exchange for a late 2027 day 3 pick. So we'll ultimately see which kind of draft pick is revealed as terms of the actual trade details. But the Jaguars needed to make a move. They have dealt with numerous offensive line injuries throughout training camp. Obviously, you went into training camp with Cole Van Lanen being placed on the PUP list. You have Patrick Mekari, who we'll talk about more here in just a second, Chuma Edoga, Walker Little, who's now back, Wyatt Milam, Jerron Christian. Like, the Jaguars have dealt with numerous injuries along the offensive line, and I think that they simply just felt like they were not in a position to have enough healthy offensive linemen suited and guys that they trusted, A, going into this upcoming preseason game against the Carolina Panthers, but B, could be something in which they don't feel confident in their unit going into the regular season for week 1 of this year. And look, we'll talk about Daniel Faalele here, but from a just overall kind of macro perspective, the Jaguars, I think, had this kind of plan at offensive line before they entered training camp, of like, if they had it where everyone was healthy and Cole Van Lanen was able to maybe recover at a quicker rate, I truly believe that going into training camp, or before they got into training camp, their thought was, okay, Van Lanen's going to be our left tackle, Ezra Cleveland left guard, center Robert Hainsey, Patrick Mekari right guard, and Anton Harrison right tackle. I think if everything played out in terms of health, and again, we know that that's not always the case in the NFL, that was going to be their starting unit, with Jonah Monheim, Emmanuel Pregnon, Wyatt Milam, and probably Walker Little, maybe Chuma Edoga. There's your kind of reserves. And we've just seen, as the list I just mentioned, Jaguars now have dealt with just so many injuries that they felt like they needed to make a move for a proven starter in the National Football League. Daniel Faalele has started each of the last 2 seasons for the Baltimore Ravens, 17 games in each season. He's a big dude, 6'8", 380 pounds. So an absolute just mountain of a man, a corn-fed behemoth, some would say. He's played right guard exclusively the last 2 years for the Baltimore Ravens. He then went to the New York Giants via free agency this offseason to reunite with his head coach that he previously had in Baltimore Ravens, who is now with the New York Giants in John Harbaugh. And look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. Daniel Faalele has not been the most productive in terms of, just being one of the better offensive linemen. Just kind of reading his PFF grades from last year, 56.7 overall grade, run block of 53.5. Pass blocking, he did have a 60 grade, 5 penalties, 4 sacks allowed. Not great statistics, kind of similar-ish on par to basically average. I went and talked to our Ravens host here at Chat Sports, and I asked him, I was just like, hey, tell me what I need to know about Daniel Faalele and just kind of overall his production. And he was not the most positive, let's call it, on Daniel Faalele. And I'm not sitting here saying that he's going to start for the Jaguars team, but he's had some not so great moments, some clips that have gone viral on Twitter. Does that mean he's going to be necessarily that player in Jacksonville? Not necessarily, and maybe getting into a new situation, he can maybe have a different form in his career. But that's obviously why, the Giants, whenever they were offered, I'm sure, this late-round pick by James Gladstone, they were willing to take it. So I just want to hear from you guys, and we're going to talk about more of what I think this could mean for Jacksonville and, what this offensive line could look like going into the regular season. But we got to pay some bills around here. We're going to talk about our friends over at PrizePicks. This show is sponsored by PrizePicks, America's #1 sports picks app. Baseball is well underway, along with a ton of other sports that you can cash in with on PrizePicks. Football is right around the corner, so make sure you're locked in with PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to win cash while watching sports. The app is really easy to use. Just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. You guys can follow me on the app and see all of my lineups at Cullen Brown NFL. And here's an example of a 3-player pick lineup, a football season-long stat projection. I've got a Marion Hampton to have the more on his rushing yards. I think the Chargers are going to have a heck of a season rushing the football. Give me the more on Brian Thomas Jr. on his receiving yards this upcoming season. And then Caleb Williams, I think, could very well be the first 4,000-yard passer for the Chicago Bears. And guys, PrizePicks does it all the time. They've got a new user offer alert. Play your first $5 lineup, and if you win that initial $5 lineup, you get $150 in bonus lineups if you win. Just use code HMA when you sign up. That's right. PrizePicks just switched up their offer, so there's no better time to join in. Lock in and win that first lineup. That's code HMA at sign up to get $150 in bonus lineups if you win your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, code HMA. Download the app now. Shout out to PrizePicks for sponsoring this episode of Jags Now. It's good to be right. All right, getting back into the conversation here around Daniel Faalele, just a player that I think if you're going to have him on your football team, he's obviously got to experience the National Football League. I just kind of want to sit there and have him as a depth piece. If he needs to start for your games, you have that in terms of like he's been there, done that. I don't want him necessarily starting for long stretches, but I don't know if he's going to do that for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think he's going to come in, compete, for some offensive guard snaps at potentially that right guard position where he's played the last 2 years for the Baltimore Ravens. And look, with Wyatt Milam set to kind of be day-to-day and expected to return back next week, he's had some up and down moments in training camp, but I think I'd rather have him in the starting lineup. I'll say this, the Jaguars are kind of experimenting with a new kind of offensive unit, obviously with Patrick Mekari, who we'll touch on here in just a moment. The Jags today, to start off their joint practice against the Carolina Panthers, they rolled out with an offensive line unit of Anton Harrison at left tackle, Emmanuel Pregnon at left guard, Robert Hainsey at center, Ezra Cleveland at right guard, and then they had Walker Little at right tackle. So Ezra Cleveland getting some work at that right guard spot, and maybe inserting Emmanuel Pregnon at left guard. So maybe getting the Rooks some potential playing time, knowing that he could be a potential candidate to start week 1 of this 2026 NFL season. And look, the Jaguars, they obviously announced recently that Patrick Mekari, that is, underwent a back procedure, and they haven't decided if they're going to place him on IR yet or not. I think what this trade is kind of telling you is, A, like they don't feel comfortable about their depth, but B, Mekari could very well end up on IR, which at bare minimum would mean he would miss the first 4 games of the season for Jacksonville. And we talked about it on yesterday's episode, going up against the Cleveland Browns, the Denver Broncos, the New England Patriots, and then week 4 against the Cincinnati Bengals. That could be a stretch where, again, the Jaguars play a lot of talented interior defensive linemen. Milton Williams, Christian Barmore, obviously Mason Graham in the infamous Jaguars-Browns trade, and then obviously Dexter Lawrence, who the Bengals traded for recently from the New York Giants. And if you're Jacksonville, you want to make sure you have the interior of the offensive line kind of buttoned up in terms of what, looks whatever you feel most comfortable going into the season with. And this is why this Cole Van Lannon injury is so devastating, but all just these injuries, right? And Patrick Mekari as well. I just think that the Jaguars wanted another reinforcement and another experienced veteran in this room to why they made this move. And yeah, this is just, kind of what you had to do. I think if you're Jacksonville, in terms of just trying to see if you can maybe find another combination that works and gives you more confidence. And I'm assuming that, Faalele is going to be in position that if he needs to take some snaps, potentially this weekend, he might even get some run with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Look, he's not somebody that I think, like I mentioned, you want to have a prolonged stint of running with your ones during the regular season, but during a preseason game, I'm fine with it. If you want to have him get some training camp reps, I don't necessarily mind with it. But the more I kind of just talk and the more I kind of just, think out loud here, because you traded a late round pick for him, I don't see any reason why he doesn't necessarily potentially make this roster, right? I mean, it is a late round pick, so if they were to cut him, I mean, I'm assuming that they just did not love what they saw at all. But given their injuries, given the fact that they traded him for, a late round pick, I think Daniel Faalele is going to be a depth piece that the Jaguars want to keep on the roster at least to start the year. So the Jaguars a trade for an offensive lineman in Daniel Faalele. I would expect him to potentially get some right guard reps here as soon as this week. And then even if he doesn't play against the Carolina Panthers this upcoming weekend, or this upcoming Friday, excuse me, heavily expect him to see him involved throughout the rest of training camp and potentially to make this 53-man roster. So let me know down below in the comment section, what was your one-word reaction to the Jaguars trading for Daniel Faalele? And mine, if I had to give like a one-word reaction to this trade, it just probably just wow. Just overall, just this is the state of the Jaguars offensive line at this point. And I obviously now am really concerned to see what Patrick Mekari's timeline is moving forward. So you guys let me know down below in the comment section what your kind of one-word reaction is to this trade from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Again, we'll have some more joint practice takeaways as they are currently joint practicing with the Carolina Panthers. And we will have more videos, more content here on the channel. So make sure you guys subscribe, turn on your notifications for all things Jacksonville Jaguars. And until next time, guys, peace out and have a great day.